Live for episode 168 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing great. Really excited about today's topic, and I'm excited to talk about Trek as always.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love these guess each other's topics. We haven't done one in a little bit, and we always say, I think it's a really neat way to put our own little spin on like a top 5 idea. It's not just us rattling off our favorites. Like we do that, but there's an element of seeing how well we know each other and yeah, something a little different about it, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And we have done a number of these. We've done captains, we've done general non-captain characters, we've done
New era
doctors, new era characters. Yeah. So we've done a bunch of these character kinds of topics, but we have not done engineers.
Nope.
And this is one of those topics that I think you could get really, you could do this a couple of different ways. There's been a lot of engineers. We have our like main series regular kinds of engineers, but then you get into more dicey territory with defining like who might be in that role and who you could go with, and characters that have kind of come and gone. And so we don't impose a lot of rules on this. You can kind of go any way you want, and I'm eager to see what you did for yourself, how you came up with your own list, and yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun. Before we get into today's topic this morning, Bill, how's your rewatch going?
Slow, but it's going. I watched I watched 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine and 1 episode of Voyager since the last time we did this. So I watched Maneuvers from Voyager, which I really like. Good Chakotay episode.
Yeah.
Good extension of the Seska situation. It's the first time we really see her since she left and exposed herself as a Cardassian spy and not who we think she is in season 1. It's kind of the reveal for just how embedded into the Kazon whole situation she has become, kind of manipulating the head of the Kazon Nistrum, and your mileage may vary with that. Some people really don't like Kazon stuff. I think most people that I know like the Seska stuff. People like that character and like that actress and like what she brings to the table. So, a good episode, really good episode. A lot of good action, a lot of neat like tactical situations and stuff going on in that. And I think Robert Beltran's really good, kind of going rogue and man on a mission kind of a thing.
Yeah. And
then in Deep Space Nine, I watched Little Green Men, which is one of my favorite Star Trek comedies.
So
I think it's really, really great.
So good.
Yeah, really strong for Ferengi stuff. Makes excellent use of those 3 characters, Quark, Rom, and Nog. And even Odo a little bit at the end.
Yeah. Saves the day.
And really enjoyed that. And the Sword of Kahless is maybe the most controversial of the 3, which you really like.
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said on Twitter that I think of it in my frame of mind. I think of it like a Klingon drinking song or a Klingon opera.
Yeah.
Very over the top, very over dramatic, and lots of action, and lots of stuff like
bloodshed.
that.
And,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an interesting way to look at it, and it definitely made me go into the episode with like my eyes wide open, kind of looking for that. And you're right, the episode does kind of mimic that tone that you would think of as like a Klingon story around a campfire kind of a thing, or a drinking song, or an opera. It does embody those over-the-top traits, and I do appreciate it on that level. And the acting's really strong. I think Michael Dorn's great in that. Kind of in one of his first. Outside of The Way of the Warrior, like really chances to shine and stretch on Deep Space Nine. He's not just playing a supporting role. He's got a lot to do. Dax is really great. It's kind of the first, I think, of many steps along the way to kind of like lock those 2 in as a cohesive thing that's going to be developed in a big way. So it's not my favorite. I don't love it, but I did enjoy it more than I have in the past, and a lot of that's kind of due to you and hearing somebody really defend it and talk about it in a way that's positive and understanding where that's coming from. So, What about you? Where's your rewatch at?
So I watched 3 episodes this week as well. That's generally my move, though.
Yeah.
So the last episode I watched or mentioned on the show was The Begotten. So the next three are For the Uniform, In Purgatory's Shadow, and By Inferno's Light.
Heavyweights.
Heavyweights. A lot going on in each episode. The war starts in Deep Space Nine, or another war starts in Deep Space Nine. But yeah, I like the wrap up. For the Uniform is definitely a tough kind of watch as far as like seeing where Cisco goes. But yeah, the start of the war is I think is great. There's some great shock and awe with Bashir being replaced by spoiler alerts replaced on the station.
Using the uniform change as like a tell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of all around great episode. I don't know if I have anything else really. I think everybody has something to do. A lot going on.
A lot of good war stuff.
Yeah, really good war stuff. I like. Prison. Yeah, he fights every day to kind of keep the attention of everyone in the kind of where they're at, where they're being held. And General Martok is there and is kind of his like guy in his corner. It's just all good stuff. So
yeah, I can't wait to hit that stretch. I feel like that's one of the stronger. We didn't talk about that little run.
Yeah.
And it's a shorter run. It's 3 episodes, but For the Uniform, and then there's 2 kind of informal 2-parter episodes. Is pretty balls to the wall. Intense episodes. And really intense. Kind of game-changing hours. So, yeah, eager to see where you go from there. I know there are some interesting episodes right off the heels of that big 2-parter, some lighter fare, more kind of traditional Star Trek stuff to kind of like bring the tone back down a little bit, I think. I'm eager to hear. Some of those episodes are less discussed. I'm eager to hear what you think.
Yeah.
Right, I guess we should get right into the topic with guessing each other's favorite engineers. So we're going to switch over to, depending on how you're watching us, to a view of our graphic that we'll kind of modify as we go, kind of revealing our guesses for each other's lists and our final actual lists.
So if you're on the podcast feed, thank you, obviously.
Yes.
But also probably best to come over to YouTube and watch it because we are going to have some stuff up on the screen that kind of helps us illustrate guessing each other's top engineers. So should be a good time.
Yeah, this is definitely, these guess each other's because of the use of the graphics is best consumed maybe as a visual hour or less. But definitely appreciate anybody out there listening on the podcast feed as well. How did you think about this? Did you stick without maybe revealing? Maybe you don't want to reveal. Let's not do that. We'll talk about that at the end.
Okay.
How we decided and who fits, because that can kind of tip off some of these choices. So, do you mind if I just roll right into guessing yours? I just throw them out there and then.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Let's get the guesses up on the board and then go from there.
Yeah.
For my guesses for you, I'm gonna say for your number 5, I'm gonna say Geordi.
Okay.
As my guess for you, and then your number 4, I'm gonna guess O'Brien. Which I'm not comfortable with this at all. Like I kind of feel like I always say that. I'm not operating with a high degree of confidence that this is the exact list. 3, I'm going to go with Torres, Voyager. 2, I'm going to go with Trip from Enterprise.
Sorry,
and I'm gonna
what
go
was 4?
4 O'Brien.
Okay.
Yeah, so 5 Jordy, 4 O'Brien, 3 Torres.
Spelled that right. Okay. Yeah.
Yep, pretty good. These are definitely the ones I feel more confident about 1 and 2 than 3 and 4, especially. And I could be wrong about all of them, but 3 Bolana Torres, 2 Trip Tucker, and 1 Scottie is going to be my guest list for you. I feel like one of the bigger challenges with this is kind of factoring in, like, trying to weigh the balance of knowing your feelings about the characters themselves and the show, the more broad series, the episodes that kind of get driven by some of these characters, and how, like, that's one of the things I thought about, like, kind of thinking of episodes that heavily feature these characters and how high they might sit on your favorites list. And I kind of, with 2 and 1, I'm pretty confident that it'll be in some order, Trip or Scottie.
Yeah.
And I just felt more comfortable going with the original with Scottie at 1 as kind of the throwback OG.
Okay, there.
There you go.
You got it. So, looking at your guess, it does have some similarities to my actual one, but I will bring out my guesses for you. So my guesses for you. Number 5 is Bolana Torres.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes. And so my number 4 for my guess for you is Paul Stamets.
Oh, okay. See, that invites an entire debate.
Yeah.
About
which again, I'm glad you left that to the end of the kind of discussion, because I, at least talking about that, I would have definitely revealed.
Yep. It's an interesting conversation point because he's kind of an outlier. Like, his job is so specific and
because he's technically not like a chief engineer or anything like
that.
He's a much more experimental type. Number 3, Miles O'Brien.
Okay. Got it.
And number 2, Trip Tucker.
Got it.
And number 1, Scottie.
Okay. Okay. We got the guesses out of the way, on the board and in place. The Stamets thing is definitely, I think, the most intriguing thing to think about going into this. Like, how do you categorize him? Like you said, he's not technically like a chief engineer. He's more of a science officer, but he works in engineering. We're in an engineering test bay.
So is he science? Is he engineering? Is he science engineering? Is he engineering science? Like, it's one of those things that he's a gray area, I think.
He's definitely a gray area, and I don't have any objection to including him on a list like this. I mean, he fills the scenes in old school Star Trek that take place in it. Like when you cut to engineering and the captain's calling down to engineering to get information, he's calling Stamets or she's calling Stamets, depending on who's in command at the time. Mm-hmm. And so, from like if you get super technical about it, and what's the day job, is it the actual chief engineer? You could say, well, Stamets doesn't count, but from just like a Star Trek lingo, who fulfills that sort of role on the show, it's Stamets. So I think I'm comfortable including him on a list here. We'll see here in a minute if he actually appears on an actual list. Let's get our actual lists on there now too, so we can get through the production side of things and posting names and just get into talking about each character.
Okay.
And so let's do your actual list. Let's reveal that now. Put them up, and then we'll get into the heavy conversation about the full range of characters.
So my number 5 is Geordi LaForge.
Okay.
I think there's different. I think the way I look at engineers is there are different types. I feel like he's very much a technician, where he's very technical, in that type of job. But he also, I feel like he really loves engineering. He loves what he does, and that's why I really do like Geordi. Okay. Number 4, Bolana Torres.
Right.
And this brings me to my next point. The type of engineer that I like is an engineer who's not afraid to get their hands dirty and actually be in a Jeffries tube upside down doing just really nitty-gritty in the trenches work. And to me, Geordi's a little bit different, where he's kind of maybe at a panel pushing some buttons, where I feel like the next 3 picks, maybe even Torres too, but the next 3 picks are nitty-gritty types of engineers. So my number 3 is O'Brien. I know he's technically a chief or something like that. He's not technically
chief petty officer.
Petty officer. He's not technically an officer, right?
Right.
But he's an engineer. I mean, he knows engineering like the back of his hand. He knows the station like the back of his hand. It's one of those things where he kind of fell into the love of engineering, and he just fixes things, and that's a common trait in engineers, I think, who just fix things. So my next one is Trip Tucker. Again, one of those engineers that just is down, he's got grease on his uniform, on his hands, just down in the nitty-gritty, fixing things, making sure the ship runs right. And my number 1, pretty predictable, it's Scottie.
Okay.
Just the original kind of miracle worker, fixing things, nitty-gritty. I think another trait of engineer is they really do care. I know the captain gets a lot of the credit of really caring about the ship, but I think the engineers are on a different level, maybe with the love of whatever they're serving on, whatever they're fixing. So that's
ship is kind of the enjoy.
Yeah, that's my list. That's my list.
Yeah, I think so the only thing I flipped was 3 and 4, which is really the area that I was torn on. Knowing your love of Voyager kind of buoyed Bolana up a little bit, but I also know, just from talking about Star Trek with you off air, and maybe even reverberating a little bit into actual conversations on Trek Live over the years, is that thing you kind of just talked about, which is, I think the different shows kind of portray the chief engineer job in slightly different ways. Like in the original series and in Enterprise and in Deep Space Nine, I think these characters, Scottie, Trip, O'Brien, are more like mechanics and like
yeah.
maintenance guys. Like they get down and dirty. They're fixing things with their hands. They get physically dirty. Like it's a more hands-on job. Where I think sometimes, and Bolana's the outlier here. I think she kind of goes in both directions depending on the episode and what the episode calls for. But Geordi especially, and sometimes Bolana, feel more like IT people, like sitting at a computer console and fixing things by, rerouting this to that, and it's less of a, and it makes sense. I think Geordi especially is on the flagship. It's
they have crewmen.
He's got an engineering crew.
Yeah.
He's not crawling in and doing like the hands-on work a lot of the time. He does. He's in Jeffers tubes all the time with data. And, doing more involved tasks. But in a crisis, he's administering more than he's getting his hands dirty. So I knew that was going to factor into your decisions as well. So that Bolana or O'Brien thing kind of, I know how much you like some of the Bolana heavy episodes in Voyager, and I think that kind of weighed me up. It was a battle between, do I go with the show that I think he maybe is a little bit more in his blood, and thinking of some of the episodes that focus on that character, or do I go with the type of engineer that I know he kind of likes with the hands dirty and nitty gritty kind of work. So and Trip and Scottie, I think because of those roles and how prominent they kind of are in pop culture with Scottie, and in the flow of Enterprise, like how important Trip is, it's kind of easy to elevate them up.
And I think engineering kind of progresses. Scottie and Trip, the time that they serve is a little bit more mechanical, I think, and more kind of hands-on. Whereas some of these later, like engineering advances, obviously, and so these later engineers that serve later in the kind of the timeline maybe don't get that kind of mechanical kind of feel, like you said.
Starships are kind of designed to within an inch of their life, and they're well run and well built, and it's less about doing the kinds of things Trip is doing on the NX-01, and more about keeping the computer systems up and running, and that kind of thing. Like I think that's a natural kind of progression over 200 years. Starfleet, design work and engineering, and that makes a lot of sense. And Scottie and Trip also have a unique trait that they kind of share, is they're kind of higher on the command track too. Like their episodes where both of those characters are even in command of the ship, so that kind of gives them a degree of prominence as well, and gives their characters even a little bit more juice and like a whole different facet. I think of episodes like Taste of Armageddon, where when Kirk and Spock are off the ship and on down the planet, the person who's in command is usually Scottie, and that kind of goes with Enterprise as well. With Archer and Paul, if they're out of the picture, it's going to be Trip. So with I'll give you mine to kind of wrap up the putting characters up on the board portion. My number 5 is Geordi.
Okay.
Who I really like. I've always really liked him. He's warm. His friendship with Data is really kind of like a defining characteristic, and that positivity, you do get the sense that he loves what he's doing. Like he found his dream job, first at the helm, first season, and then wound up in engineering and just totally flourished and loved that new gig. I like that about him. I think, especially as the show got rolling, his episodes didn't necessarily always, hit it out of the park. I think they struggled at times to give him strong episodes that focused on him as the show got going, like into the later seasons. But he was often, I think, a strong supporting player in other episodes. And then my number 4 is going to be Bolana Torres.
Okay.
Who I, having just kind of finished the early days of Voyager, those early episodes, Parallax being a big one. I love her kind of square peg in a round hole journey of becoming, a fully functional, Starfleet officer without the background, without the formal training and stuff that usually leads somebody into a job like that. The rough around the edges kind of journey she's on, but her competence and her smarts are kind of obvious and real assets for that ship and that show. And they do such interesting things with their character, with kind of the relationship with parents, and she's a fully fleshed out member of that cast. So she's awesome. O'Brien's going to be my 3. He's kind of the everyman. I think he's as close to like the relatable guy that you're going to find in Star Trek. He's a family guy. He's got a wife. He's got kids. He's he likes to go to the bar after a shift and have a drink and play darts.
Family man.
Hang out with his friends. He's got the family stuff, but he also wants to get away from the family sometimes and have his own time. And like he's got things that I think just about anybody would recognize in themselves as a working person, like blue collar guy. And I think that all works perfectly. He's like you said, he's not an officer. He's a petty officer. He's got the soldier background too. So he's got a complicated past, and I think all those things build toward his successfully being like carrying on that everyman persona and giving that show that part of its personality. My number 2 is going to be Scottie.
Okay.
Which was a tough thing to do, given how just huge he is in pop culture. Beaming up Scottie is like one of those things that people who never saw an episode of Star Trek in their life know what that is. Like they know that character's name, they know what he does, they know all that stuff. And, like I said, he gets command situations. He's prominent in quite a few episodes of TOS. His impact on like the greater Star Trek mythology is obvious. So he's obviously awesome. But I went with Trip because as my number 1. Because I think he's just so critical to that series. He's such an important key player in
not just the health of the running of the ship, but of the actual show, you're saying.
The show, yeah exactly. He does have those traits that kind of like Scottie. He's down and dirty. He's, I love, like you said, the style of engineering, the literally getting dirty. O'Brien kind of does that too. Literally, Chief O'Brien will like roll his sleeves up. He's dirty. Trip is obviously kind of the same way. He doesn't usually roll his sleeves up, but I think a couple times he does, and he's, the grease of the ship is like in his skin. Like it's just never. He's gonna always have that. And so those things are obvious and definitely a part of this decision to put him at number 1. But it's also like I said, he's in the triumvirate of the show. He's in the trio. So he's in the DNA of what makes that show go. And Enterprise wouldn't be Enterprise without Trip Dyer. Like that show just wouldn't have it fundamentally changed the show to substitute that actor or substitute that character with any other kind of personality, any kind of different kind of performance, different kind of role for that character would fundamentally shift the show. So he's so critical to that, and he's successful. I think one of the reasons I love Enterprise so much is because of him. I think he brings, again, very similar to O'Brien, like that everyman kind of quality. He's not a family guy. He doesn't have a wife and kids on the ship the way O'Brien has on Deep Space Nine, but I think his reason for being there is loyalty to Archer, his, the way his emotions can kind of get the best of him, and he leads with his heart and like lets his gut kind of drive his decisions. And, gets himself into dicey situations with Paul and has to live with those consequences and deal with that. Like he's a purely human character. He's a totally humanist character that gives off qualities that I think anybody can recognize. So I think he's the most,
and he's
all my money, successful.
He's all in with the captain, with Archer.
I
mean, First Flight. I think that's like their origin story, their friendship. It's like he's all in to just go for it.
And maybe that's the other thing. Like you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think all these characters would share like a immense sense of pride in their ship.
Oh yeah, big time.
They take like a maternal quality of care to the vessel, the ship that they're kind of taking care of and making run. The thing that Trip has is he has that for the NX-01, but it's equal that and Archer. Like he's as loyal to Archer as he is to the ship. That's what has him there. Like that's a different kind of quality that I think separates Trip as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I felt pretty comfortable doing that, having him at number one. Okay. It gave some thought to Scottie for sure. I knew they were going to be my top two, and I knew they were going to be your top two. I would have been really surprised if you would have gone in a different direction. It was just a matter of how to stack those two, and then to think about the other three slots. So we both pretty much went with the in the main credits, the clear chief engineer of the shows, which I'm glad you mentioned Stamets in the guest, just to kind of get that conversation out there about what he is, how he is. Yeah. So we got to talk about that, which is good.
One thing, just kind of to go back a little bit on the kind of in the engineering position, your love of the ship kind of trumps a lot of things. But I like when people say Captain always goes down with the ship. That to me isn't. I mean, maybe it's accurate, but also the engineer's right there with him. I don't think the captain would be alone. So
no.
Yeah, and I also like kind of with LaForge, he does take pride in, and there's I forget the episode, or if it's maybe it could be a throwaway line, but he's wanting the Enterprise to be as efficient as possible over another ship. Like he takes pride, and that's a really big mark to all these kind of engineers, is they really do take pride in, hey, if there's a 0.003 percentage where we can be better than someone else's ship, that's what we're gonna do. So I really do love that. Not just about Geordi, but just about just the pride that each of these characters has with their ship. So
yeah, there's definitely, I think it's the Icarus factor, like it is kind of a throwaway dialogue thing in that episode. But I remember they're like at a starbase, and they're gonna have an interaction with another ship, and O'Brien or Geordi's like concerned with being there's like a rivalry with the other chief engineer. He wanted to make sure that the work efficiency or whatever on the Enterprise is better than the other ship. And I think that you can kind of sense that too in a lot of ways. A lot of these characters would have that degree of like almost competitiveness and wanting to make sure their ship was first in line with things like that, engine efficiency and this and that.
Or like in the Trouble with Tribbles, like Scottie gets in a fight. I mean, they go fisticuffs because of there's some slanderous things said about the ship. It's just I just love that about these characters. Yeah,
and to kind of go back to like what we were saying about Trip, like Scottie, there's a funny point made in Trouble with Tribbles about Kirk kind of being like taken aback that it wasn't insulting Kirk that started the fight, it was insulting the Enterprise. With Trip, it would probably be the other way around. He'd probably swallow the insult to the Enterprise, but insulting Archer would get him riled up.
Yeah.
Like that would start a problem. Yeah. So that's an interesting distinction as well. But you could sense both of those characters getting into a bar fight over one or the other.
Yeah. But that just kind of goes back to the fact that these are really relatable characters for I don't know, some reason. And I think it's cool because I'm glad we're doing this, because I feel like engineering isn't always like they don't always get the glory, or they're always the people behind the scenes making everything run. They're not command. They're not saving. I mean, they could, but they're just kind of like.
But they do. A lot of the time, the episode kind of, especially in Voyager and the Next Generation, how many crises are solved by...
That's true.
Geordi, reroute, blah, 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 technobabble. Or the same thing for Bolana. Like, they do save the ship a lot.
Yeah.
It's usually through technobabble and, rerouting this and recalibrating that.
Yeah, power to this system. And,
power to that, yep. Exactly. Yeah, that happens all the time. They are critical components, but I think maybe because of that, because a lot of the episodes are resolved with that technobabble speak, that maybe it's kind of like easily glossed over, and people are like, oh, it's just that's their way of solving the crisis of the week. But they do add, like, it's one of those things that is like a common trait among all these shows. Even Stamets, who's kind of a unique animal and isn't like a traditional chief engineer, what he's doing is he's serving that purpose. He's the person down in the bowels of the ship who has to do the technical stuff to solve a problem, and all these shows have that. So it's one of those things in the DNA of Star Trek that has kind of always been there.
Yeah.
Probably always will to some extent.
Mm-hmm. If you're a captain and you're trying to put together a roster, is your number one choice for chief engineer of your ship? Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not Archer, so I don't know, but I'd like the idea of having an engineer who is as, tied to my hip as Trip is to Archer. Like having that kind of friend in that kind of critical position. You have Archer up at the top, running the bridge and the command stuff. And, the thing that the captain kind of has to take their eye off of and assume is getting run well is down in the bowels of the ship in the engineering section. Yeah. And having somebody that you trust and have like that real connection with would probably come in handy. And he's just a likable guy. It just seems like, of these characters, he's the one that they all are. I mean, they're all like O'Brien, who doesn't want to hang out with somebody at Quark's playing darts. I mean, he's obviously very relatable too. But Trip would probably be the one that I would pick. But I think you're also right, kind of saying that maybe there's something to these characters kind of having in across the board, all of them have that everyman quality to some extent because of the kind of work that they do. Yeah, that's sort of a common trait with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jimmy 77's in the YouTube chat saying Scottie is probably his favorite, but it's a tough choice. He likes them all. Mm-hmm.
Right there with you, Jimmy.
Yeah, they're all great in their own ways. Geordi's evolution, I have him fifth, and so does Dan, but he evolves a lot. Starting as the helmsman, growing into the engineering job, and being the engineer of the flagship, and having a big career. Like, he's got his own unique qualities, and I think in some of those earlier seasons, episodes like Booby Trap and the Enemy and the identity crisis and his relationship with Barclay, like there are things in Geordi's character that are really interesting and really dynamic. I really think he's a successful character too. He's a little underrated, and the fact that he's fifth, it says it all about the other four.
Yeah, that is true.
Anybody else that, like, how close did you give? How much thought did you give to putting Stamets on your list?
He was close, because I think and maybe there was a few other characters that could, but I think that, again, he's I don't know if he's like one of these types that's kind of relatable and everyday man, but you can tell that he does care about his work and cares about the ship. So I think that's a quality in all of these engineers. So Stamets was close for me just because, again, I think he's really knowledgeable. But I think what held him off was I didn't know what he kind of fell as. He's kind of in that gray area where I'm like, is he science? Is he engineering? Is he experimental science engineer? Like, it's just like it's tough. But I think he's definitely a great quality. He definitely cares about his work, cares about the ship. Very knowledgeable. He might be difficult to work with initially. I think what a lot of these people in the top 5 have is they work well with others. They lead really well. They obviously have to. They have a lot of crewmen that they have to kind of oversee and a lot of work that has to get done. So I think all these characters do lead really well, but Stamets was one of those ones where I'm not sure how to really categorize him. Actually.
Yeah, he's got some unique qualities too. I mean, he's, like you're kind of alluding to there, a lot of, like, you do get the sense, especially early on, that he can be difficult to work with, prickly, and a lot of that comes from the fact that he's dealing with something that he's kind of fundamentally tied to. It's his work, but he's not completely in command of the direction it's going and the pace it's going at and how it's being used, which is frustrating for him. His reputation is kind of on the line. That's kind of different. I feel like he's got a different kind of chip on his shoulder than these other characters
That's true.
have. Yeah. The Bolana maybe a little bit at the very, very beginning of Voyager, which is still kind of like earning her reputation and proving that she's belonging in that spot. But other than that, these are all kind of characters who've kind of earned their position and are there for a reason. and Stamets is a little bit of a different animal in that respect.
Yeah,
he's really operating with a big chip on his shoulder, especially in that first season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Really good stuff. We love all these characters, and I think a lot of different roles in Star Trek. You could do this kind of a exercise with. We've done doctors, we've done captains. We have not. I don't think we've done first officers. We talked about first officers, but I don't think we've done the guess each other's favorites and do like a stacking of them. And now there's a whole lot more of potential first off. Just Discovery alone.
Oh yeah.
How do you
do that?
You can pick a whole bunch of them as potential choices there, and then even like Lower Decks. There's a new character there that you could if you wanted to. So there's a lot of new stuff that is very much on the table there. So I'm sure we'll have to do that at some point. And then some of those other like helmsmen, you can do that. You could do, Jerry. You do a whole lot of things you could do. If you want.
I think that about wraps it up. Definitely let us know. The discussion does not have to stop here. We want to hear if you just want to talk about an engineer, that's totally fine too. You don't have to give your top 5, but we definitely encourage the top 5. The more picks, the better. These are always fun. It's always fun to kind of change how we do our top 5. So it's always really fun. And it's talking about engineers, which might be one of my favorite kind of position groups in all of Trek. So always a good time.
Yeah.
Talking about engineers.
Agreed. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It was cool to revisit those characters and think about them in that way. Who's my favorite? Who's your favorite? Totally agree that the Guess Each Other's is one of my favorite things that we do for all those reasons. I'd ask you to consider joining our Discord server if you're looking for ways to interact with Star Trek fans and you want to talk about things like this. You can send me a direct message on Twitter at TrekFan4387. I can get you hooked up. I can explain Discord if you've never used it before, and get you invited to the server where you'll find positive, friendly, open-minded Star Trek fans who are willing and eager to talk about all aspects, old, new, and in between.
Yep. I will be back next week, in some capacity, talking about Star Trek as always. But I want to thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Mother's Day.